Welcome back to another edition of the KC Laboratory presented by Emprise Bank member FDRC. Our partners impossible. Guys, listen, I am not your usual host, as you may notice. I am not Ken Swanson. He is not here today. But I am happy. I am joined by Tucker D. The D stands for stepping up to the plate when he is needed. Franklin Tucker, how are we doing today, buddy?
Look, I'm doing great. Kent needed a pitch hitter, and I said I'm good. I'm coming off the bench, feeling pretty good. Got nice and warmed up prior to coming in on here, so I got a nice and warm podcast ready to rip for another one. Look, we can't do this without Emprise Bank either. You gotta give all the props to Emprise Bank, and I really just want to shout out Emprise Bank so I can show off my soundboard again, so I can give a little. Give a little applause.
That's not me. Look, my hands are up. That's not me. That's all.
That's right. I was telling Maddie before the show started, I added some new sounds to the soundboard. So you guys on that football show, on Only Weird Games, this program, who knows? We might make Maddie might be making a really good point in the middle of the podcast, and I might just drop one of those. So like we've got all kinds of great sounds ready to rip for all podcasts. And look, if Kent pops in, we got the perfect sound for him, Maddie. We got the perfect sound.
Oh, I mean, listen, I like that. I think this is worthwhile too. Like, listen, I'm not Kent's not here. I don't know if he's doing okay. We always tell you when Craig's okay. I don't know. Craig is doing great.
Craig is okay. I did just talk to him a little bit ago. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's doing fantastic. I don't know. He's in the wind right now. Late call out of the show, doesn't even let us know, keeps us completely in the dark. And then we have to roll it. No, I'm kidding. Kent has an entire schedule planned out for like 3 months about what he wants to talk about for the rest of the summer. So we are going to get started now. Normally we are doing our positional deep dive right now, but I actually added another segment to the show entirely. Kent's not here. I get some freedom. We are adding a new segment every single show for the rest of the summer. Before we get into these positional deep dives, we are going to go back to some lessons learned from the previous season. So we are going to, in the future, at the end of it, we are going to pick just a random week in our minds, no number generator or anything. We're just going to pick a week and we're going to go back and watch that game before our next lab show. So the next one after this will be on Wednesday. And we're just going to watch it and then talk about the lessons we learned, the grandiose lessons we learned from that game and how it relates to the Chiefs moving forward. And what better way to start it, Tucker, this time than the first one, the inaugural episode, and with the absolute beatdown of Super Bowl 59, where the Eagles dog walk the Chiefs up and down the field. We finally mustered up the courage to go back and watch that game, and there are lessons abound to be taken away from it. So what's the first thing that jumped out to you that the Chiefs need to keep in mind for the upcoming season?
Well, first, I want to give a little bit of a for starting on this game, right? I actually, Maddie, funny enough, I actually watched this game the other day for some reason, at least the end of it, because before the schedule release came out,
they were feeling too happy.
Yeah, I needed to bring myself down a notch. Before the schedule release program that they were having on NFL Network, the super extravaganza they had of like an hour, maybe about 2 hour long programming for the schedule release, which is like way too long. They were showing that Super Bowl, and I wanted my TV to be on NFL Network because I was live streaming for the game, for the schedule release. So I turned it on, and it was like the last quarter of the game. So I was watching that game. I got to see a few positives, overall, a lot of negatives. But, Maddie, I think we would be remiss if my first takeaway from this game is you can't have a guard playing tackle. That's my biggest takeaway. You can't have a guard playing tackle. And look, when the Chiefs have lost Super Bowls, it's come when offensive linemen are playing out of position. The Chiefs addressed the offensive line pretty good amount this offseason with signing Jalen Moore, drafting Josh Simmons. They put a franchise tag on Trey Smith. Now, they did trade away Joe Thuney, which is a very interesting kind of conversation to have. I know a lot of people when it was trending on social media, the video of Patrick Mahomes' deep passes, which we might talk about here in a little bit. That was trending on social media a little bit, and everyone's like, "Oh, he's gonna tear it up. His offensive line is gonna be so much better." I think it's interesting that people are kind of forgetting that Joe Thuney now plays for the Chicago Bears, and that's going to be a little bit of Well, and I think it's fair for me to say it's a fall off from Joe Thuney going to Kingsley Suamataia, who has played only one career NFL game at guard. So the jury is still out on that. So what it really comes down to me is Andy Reid loves offensive line continuity. We know that about him. If he makes a decision, he wants to stick with it. That's what made last year's offensive line kind of debacle seem so odd and so out of character for the Chiefs and Andy Reid teams. I think that the offensive line this year is going to be a decision made and they're going to stick with it. For better or for worse, I think that's going to be how it is. And so my biggest takeaway from that game was, look, don't have guards playing tackle. That's how you get yourself in trouble. You got guards playing tackle. That's how you lose Super Bowls. It's the only way that Patrick Mahomes has lost a Super Bowl is when he's got his guards playing tackle.
I was muted, so I couldn't talk. Yeah, you're correct. And I like the way that you approach that because I figured the offensive line would come up. So that's not one of my lessons. I actually just kind of pocketed that, assuming that would come up. Right. And so I'm glad you went this route, though, because that was going to be like my addition was regardless of if the offensive line played good or bad, something I think that Andy might need to, and this is Andy Heck and Andy Reid might need to kind of take back to the drawing board now is, hey, if we're going to have to solve offensive tackle for a not short-term period, so not just getting out of a game, not just for a game or two while someone's hurt, maybe instead of shoving out one offensive guard to play left tackle, because that's the easiest way, because he's the most ready to do it right away. He gives you the most safe, competent level of play right away. Maybe you do take a little bit bigger swing on the upside and try an actual tackle. And I think we talked about this a little bit going into the playoffs last year, was just kind of like, hey, the Chiefs side DJ Humphries, then he gets hurt. We don't know what he's going to look like. But if you want to go chase the ceiling, it's probably better to just play him in that, not the wild card, the divisional round of the playoffs, and move Thuney back inside, because you're going to go chase the ceiling of what the offensive line looks like if you have a actual left tackle playing left tackle, a all-pro guard playing guard, so on and so forth. But if you want a safe floor, you keep Thuney at left tackle because you know that he's going to be not a disaster. Well, it turned out actually, if you play guard at left tackle for long enough and people get enough film on you, it might still be a disaster despite being an exceptional player. So maybe if you do have to fix the offensive line, just maybe the best move isn't moving a guard out to tackle, especially in the middle of the year. I understand why they did it last year. It's just like you said, Mike Rimmers ended up playing tackle for a while for the Chiefs, going back to what year was that, 2020 season, Super Bowl there. He played tackle a little bit for the Chiefs in spots, but like he had to play left tackle in that Super Bowl, and it was a problem. And he's a guy that had been essentially moved to guard after some struggles at tackle for other teams. Comes to the Chiefs, he mostly plays tackle for them, but like that was never his best spot. So just, let's quit with the moving guards out wide. I think that's the big lesson to learn from this.
Did you see that Mike Rimmers was at the 15 of the Mahomes gala this weekend? This golf
Good
tournament?
for him.
Shout out Mike Rimmers.
Listen, I love Mike Rimmers. I did too. I did, yeah. That I had, my laptop that I've had to retire actually since the draft that everybody saw. But like, you've seen it when it goes to the screensaver, it's just flashing through random pictures on there. I have the Mike Rimmers first down point that he did in the game. It's one of the pictures that's randomly saved on there, and I laugh every time it comes up. So yeah, shout out Mike Rimmers. Love that guy. I'll stick with the offense. And I think we'll probably get a little bit more into this next week, because I think we're going to do wide receivers next week, and that's a big part of it. But I think the Chiefs, it's time for Andy Reid to get back into the back and be like, hey, we gotta update this offense a little bit. We've hit a little bit of a wall here. Going 3-by-1 and constantly flooding the boundary with routes is no longer working. And it happens when you go up against a team like the Eagles with excellent communication in the secondary, a good defensive coordinator that plays with a lot of good match principles. They know what they're looking for. They have everybody communicating. You can go back and watch the Super Bowl, and so much of it is 3-by-1, and the Chiefs, whether they're condensed or not, they're just sending 3 receivers, sometimes 4 with the running back, to the same portion of the field. And the idea is to create these triangles so that you find throwing lanes. It's a good idea, except for the Eagles are now putting more defenders on that side of the field than they are the other. They're essentially playing one-on-one man coverage on the backside and saying, we don't think you can beat us. More on that in a second. But to the other side of it, just like, that concept of flooding zones, while it does work, we have seen it work. I don't know if you can build the entire offense out of that anymore. The entire passing game can't be based around that when everyone's going to play these two high shells and they're going to rotate and shift, because now all of a sudden I can get both these safeties, one over the top, one can rotate down. I've now added both safeties to this same side of the field. So I just think it's time to revamp what the Chiefs do. And I think if you go look at a lot of the passing offenses right now that are having more success, I don't want to say like they never go 3-by-1, they don't flood the sidelines and stuff, but they play a lot more out of balance stuff. It's a lot more 2-by-2. It's a lot more, hey, we're going to have a route concept on this side of the field and a route concept on the other. We're going to have two different things going on, and maybe they'll intermingle. That's fine to run stuff that is levels over the middle of the field. It's fine to have a crosser that adds to the other side, but not everything has to be completely segregated to one side of the field. And I just feel like the Chiefs lock themselves into that so much.
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the things that when we pick nits about this team, right? Because that's what we're doing, really, when it comes down to how good this team is. That's one of the things that is common. Like it commonly comes up about the it's not necessarily as much as play calling as is the schematics of the plays that they are calling. So
the
like
structure.
Yeah, the structure of the play. So I think it's going to be interesting when you look at how their wide receiver room is structured. Again, you guys are going to talk about wide receivers here coming up. And I think that when you look at how their wide receiver room is structured, it kind of lends to possibly doing some more creative things because they got a lot of the same types of wide receivers in that room. So maybe they can do a little bit more. We'll have to see. But Maddie, that kind of leads into what my second takeaway was. They were trying to throw the ball deep in that game. Ultimately, the offensive line caused them not to. There was a couple times they did connect with Xavier Worthy, and they were huge plays, right? So they were trying to throw the ball deep. I'm curious, to your point about offensive play calling, if that is more of something they try to do coming up in this season when they know what Xavier Worthy can do. They got a little bit of a glimpse of it. I mentioned a little bit earlier. I'm trying to find the tweet here. Not very professional of me to be unprepared for this, and even though I knew I was going to talk about this. But there were some numbers, Matt. You even quote tweeted him a little bit about Patrick Mahomes' deep ball throwing percentage. And I thought what was really interesting is that Xavier Worthy had the most targets. He had the most targets of throws over 20-plus air yards. He had 3 catches. 16 targets, 3 catches. That is... I think deep ball accuracy is very interesting because I think I responded to you about it's almost a wide receiver stat to a certain extent. Like you can only place the ball so well before a wide receiver goes up and makes a play, right? You could probably say that about any throw. But I've always kind of tend to lean towards deep ball accuracy being a little bit more of a wide receiver metric than it is necessarily for a quarterback. Yeah. But we did get to see some of those throws that Patrick Mahomes made leading up to the Super Bowl. They weren't necessarily all that accurate. They weren't necessarily all on the same page. And I believe he was like 33rd out of like 35 qualified quarterbacks in terms of deep ball accuracy. It was a rough to see from there. And look, the offensive line obviously didn't help in the Super Bowl of them wanting to throw the ball deep. He had no time to let Xavier Worthy, as fast as he is, get all the way down there. But on the offensive side of the ball, and I think this probably goes into more of the play calling creativity or play design creativity of what they have with Xavier Worthy and the other wide receivers that they have in that room. I want to see him air the ball out more because, look, we got to see a little bit of a glimpse. We got a little bit of a tease of what Xavier Worthy can do on a deep ball, and that was enough to get me excited for this year.
So shout out. I believe the stats are coming from Jacob Gibbs, JA Gibbs _23 on Twitter. He works at CBS Sports. He's actually a Chiefs fan. I didn't know that. We were talking a little bit after this. So yeah, he's been a lifelong Chiefs fan. So shout out Jacob. But yeah, the stats came from there. Mahomes ended up essentially on throwing catchable ball percentage on deep passes over 20+ air yards. He was QB 25 out of I don't know 33 qualifying guys.
33, yep.
Now, I will say this is under no pressure. So like if you expand it out to pressure, maybe things change a little bit. I don't know. Xavier Worthy got like 16 of, what did we say here? Like 36 of the pass attempts or whatever they are all went to Xavier Worthy, which is an insanely high number. If you just look at all 20+ yard pass attempts from Patrick Mahomes this past year, pressure or not, Worthy had 21 targets. Do you know who's second on the team?
No clue. I have no clue.
DeAndre Hopkins. Now, I guess,
Awesome.
okay, now I don't know how many came. I guess PFF isn't splitting this up between his time with the Titans and the Chiefs, but I'm assuming the majority of that came with the Chiefs based on just what it looked like for the Titans for him.
That's
So
true.
it's just third is Marquise Brown, who played barely anything.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's just crazy how few people they had to actually try to push the ball downfield when they did. And we did see it in the Super Bowl. They were trying to push the ball vertically towards Worthy in particular. I think it's part of the issue the Chiefs ran into. And I think this is a little bit tied into going 3-by-1 all the time. But when they do, they kind of have to call a designer play. They can't really call, just whatever play you want to decide. They can't go out there and call a Mills play or a dagger play and be like, hey, if the post is open, we're going to hit it. Cause it's not that they don't run those. They absolutely do run those. I want to be very clear. They run them a lot, but just, they don't typically get to that deep shot off of those. Instead, it's these hard play actions where Mahomes is like half rolling out, then planting and trying to usually throw back across the field. Like, they really had to design up some of these deep shots, and they almost always went to Worthy. They very rarely seem to find them within the structure of what the play is going to be. Like, very rare, like, oh, we're just calling this deep drop back pass play, and then he's trying to push the ball downfield, even in that Super Bowl. So I hope that comes back. But I do agree with your point. I think they were trying to push the ball downfield. So I just want to ask real quick, did you think that their ineffectiveness on the vertical pass game in the Super Bowl was anything to do with quarterback and wide receiver play, or did you think it was more centered around the offensive line?
Man, it was so hard to kind of decide if it was anything with quarterback and wide receiver because the offensive line play was so poor. And look, I think that's more of a credit. Obviously, the Chiefs were playing hobbled on their offensive line, but I think that was more of a credit to the Eagles defense. I think the Eagles defense played an outstanding game and in the Super Bowl as well. Even after rewatching it, their defensive line wrecked havoc. And it's very hard for them to get any sort of rhythm or anything down at all with that. So it was hard for me to decide if it was quarterback wide receiver chemistry or if it was more offensive line, because I think the offensive line, especially in that game in particular, was just so bad. I want to point out this comment from Ronson Trey. He said, to be fair, there was a few with Worthy oblivious to where the sideline was. And that's true. There was a couple of them that he thought that he had about 5 or 6 more feet, and he didn't. So that is also to take into consideration there with that stat.
No, it absolutely is. I would agree that Worthy got better as the year went on, and Mahomes was still missing them. I just, to that point, I think in the Super Bowl, I think there was a couple times where it almost felt like Mahomes just decided not to throw the deep ball because it wasn't wide open. And I think that goes back to like my overarching theory of where I don't know. I think he feels uncomfortable throwing the ball downfield, and not even uncomfortable. I think he thinks too much about it. And because everything the Chiefs do to push the ball vertically is designed, he's thinking about it the entire play. And so when like you reference the cut up going around of all of his deep passes, not even when pressured, his throwing motion is just so different on all of them. Some he overstrides, some he understrides, some he short arms, some he fades away. Like, he doesn't seem to have a rhythm. And I notice most often that comes on plays where I think it's designed deep shots. Whereas when you see a couple of them that are, I don't want to say like broken plays, but you see a couple times where he's just kind of having to fire the ball because somebody comes open or because he is about to be under pressure, it looks more like confident. And I think we saw it at the end of the Eagles game when the game was out of hand. He just said, fuck it. Earmuffs, and just started launching the ball. And like, hey, there was some fantastic throws there. The game, it didn't matter, but there were some fantastic throws to Worthy there. So you got to get him out of his own mind a little bit. So hopefully they find a way to do that in the offseason coming up.
Yeah. Matt, I don't know if I had one more honorable mention as we were talking about it that stuck out to me.
Perfect. Yeah, hit it.
Okay. Before we hit a break, I want to talk about one other thing that stood out for me. This is all on the offensive side of the ball. I think it's so hard to take anything away from the defense in that game because they played their ass off.
And it'll be after the break. I got one, so it's perfect.
Okay, perfect. So I think for me, it was so hard to take anything away because they were on the field like all the time. So it was like some of those things are just like, I can't really fault them because that's a 40-play drive that they were just on. Right. They had no juice at running back. All of their running backs were out of gas. And like, that's part of the Isaiah Pacheco trying to come back as fast as he could from a broken leg. You had 47-year-old Kareem Hunt back there after taking the bulk of the carries for basically dragging this team to the Super Bowl. Kareem Hunt's body just said enough. they're not going to throw Carson Steele out there because he had the fumbling issues. But you were left back there where the Chiefs, in the middle of this year, were kind of leaning on their running game. They were getting good runs from Kareem Hunt. They were getting good production out of their running back room, and they just didn't have anywhere to turn. And so it was very clear and very apparent that they had a lack of juice in the backfield. What is juice? What can you call juice? Is there a certain thing that you can explicitly say that's juice? I don't think so. I think it's a very thing like when you got it and when you don't have it. And it's when it comes with juice, especially in the running back room. And those guys, to their credit, man, they worked their ass off. Kareem Hunt, as I mentioned, all those carries that he had from coming off the literal couch. They signed him off the literal couch in week 2. Isaiah Pacheco working back from a broken ankle. Samaje Perine too, another older guy that has had a lot of carries on his body. They just ran out of juice, and I think that was very apparent where the Chiefs on the offensive side of the ball just had nowhere to turn when it came down to it in that game.
Yeah, and I know some fans, and I mean, in hindsight, the Chiefs obviously should have tried running the ball a little bit more, but they were ineffective trying to do so. The Eagles said, hey, we don't care if you run the ball because it's not going to matter. And would it have mattered of maybe getting some of the pass rushers to back off just a tad? Maybe. Could it maybe have prolonged the game from not being a blowout into a little bit more of a slow death? And if that happened, does the pressure mount? Did the Eagles make more mistakes? Because it wasn't like their offense was above making mistakes early in the game and give the Chiefs a chance. Maybe. So obviously it would have been better again in hindsight to run the ball more. But if you're the Eagles game planning, you don't care. I will let Kareem Hunt, Kareem Hunt, run into a light box. I will let Isaiah Pacheco run into his blockers in a light box. And I will deal with that. I'll live with that. And I think the Eagles made that kind of calculated assessment and said, I bet the Chiefs are going to try to throw the ball. And the Chiefs, to their discredit, really relied on trying to push the ball downfield. And it was unfortunate. Yeah. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I got one more big lesson from this game before we get into our positional deep dive.
Shop Chiefs tickets and more with no fees. Plus, save big with code KCSN at ticketsforless.com, the official ticket provider of KC Sports Network.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story, like Brain Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Brain Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner in possible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
It's playoff time, and if you're still just watching games, then you're missing out. With Pick 6 from DraftKings, you can turn your hoops knowledge into real cash. Just make your picks, track your score, and if you hit all 6, you're looking at bigger payouts than Prize Picks flex plays. Nobody's dropping better payouts than Pick 6. Hit 6 picks, and that's 25 times your cash. And if you beat your competitor, you could be looking at a 500 times bag in your pocket. And right now, new customers get $50 in bonus picks with just a $5 entry. The playoffs are on, so why not take a shot at making a little money while you're watching? Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app right now and use code KCSN. That's code KCSN to play $5 and get $50 in bonus picks. Better payouts, bigger wins, only on Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. One per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 bonus picks that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. Terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
Welcome back to the KC Laboratory, where we are sitting here discussing lessons learned from Super Bowl 59, where the Chiefs lost to the Eagles. We have touched on hey, don't play guards at offensive tackle. Probably
Right.
good business. The passing game probably needs a little bit of a revamp. Maybe we don't live in a 3-by-1 flood the sidelines world anymore. That's just not what beats too high structures all the time. Tucker's followed that up with like, hey, they tried to push the ball downfield. Maybe that continues. And hey, get a running back with some juice. And apparently, for one like equals one running back with juice. So get the likes up.
True.
And I guess the juice gets flowing. All right, my final take from that game. And this, I think, ties in well to our positional deep dive on the edge position a little bit too.
Okay.
The Chiefs have gotten this mantra as being a defensive team that has Patrick Mahomes who wins games in crunch time over the past 2-3 seasons. I understand how we got there, but I think especially without L'Jarius Sneed last year, and even with him probably a little bit too, I don't think this defense has the not star power, but the playmaking power to beat good teams over and over and over again on their back. Not that they can't keep them in position to, but if you think back to when the Chiefs beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl 2 years back or 3 years back, the offense had to have an exceptional half. Not that the defense played bad, but the offense had to put up a lot of points. You think back to the 49ers Super Bowl win, this most recent one. Yes, again, the defense played really well, but the offense really had to do their fair share to come back and get that win as well. I don't think the Chiefs defense, for as good as it is, as much as I love Steve Spagnuolo, has enough avenues to taking over, shutting down, and winning game after game against really good teams. You look at beating the Bills. It's been on the back of super efficient offensive performances in the playoffs, right? I don't think they have Chris Jones, who can make plays. Absolutely. Who's the next guy you think can make a play that changes the game, right? Like Trent McDuffie's an excellent football player. I don't think of him as a guy that makes a ton of game-changing plays. Like, I don't know who would be next. So it's just, I don't think the Chiefs have this, we can let our defense win this Super Bowl type of game for us. And to call them that, to position them that as a team, I do think is a little of a misunderstanding of who they are.
I think that's a really good point. As you mentioned, again, like they add Mike Hughes on this team, who is a certified ball hawk, and he is a guy who has a nose for the football. I do think it's interesting when you talk about the playmaking, and I, as you were talking about that, I was like, where did the Chiefs rank last year in terms of takeaways? Because it just seemed like they are
Browns game did a lot of heavy lifting there. I remember that conversation going into that game.
It did do a lot of heavy lifting. Thank you, James Winston, for all the gifts you gave. But they had 20 takeaways last year, 13 interceptions, 7 fumble recoveries. Their turnover differential was only +6, which puts them about midway, pretty close to midway, just over midway, actually, in terms of total takeaways. Their differential puts them up, a little bit higher, but really it's about the same though. So your point to defensive playmakers, my first thought for playmaking comes to turning the ball over, right? And the Chiefs the past couple years, truthfully, haven't been a team that forces a lot of turnovers to get the ball into the hands of Patrick Mahomes very more times than not. And I do think that's interesting. Obviously, a lot of those things are opportunistic things as well. Like you have to be presented with the opportunity to create the turnover. Sometimes those aren't opportunities to create, but then you have to create your own opportunities. But I do think, maybe I go back to another word the same word that I've used, Maddie. Juice. I think juice might be the theme of the day, because they need some they need some juice when we start talking about this edge rushing. We'll talk about these edge rushers here coming up, but like juice is something that they need in that room. Juice is something that they need on the defensive side of the ball, as you mentioned with like L'Jarius Sneed. That man brought the juice. He was dirting at Tyreek Hill in the middle of a freezing cold playoff game. Like he wasn't maybe the same type of like running back juice as like you would get from on that side of the ball, but like it's a different type of swagger. It feels like they didn't quite have that juice last year on the defensive side of the ball. And I think takeaways will come, right? They'll be there if you're putting yourself in the right position, if you are playing with that juice. But I did find that interesting that the Chiefs just like are very much a defense that doesn't really turn the ball over. It doesn't get turnovers for the other team. And I think that sometimes can put them behind. Like if you look at the Buffalo Bills last year, +24 turnover differential. I think that is that's wild in terms of that. But I think that just is because Josh Allen stopped third throwing
But-
also helped.
And
But
their defense was bad elsewhere, but they did good there. Yeah, and like the Chiefs' defense has not been the best at creating turnovers for a while. Under Steve Spagnuolo, I'm like, it's crazy because he does harp on it a lot, but it's not something that they've done great under him.
right.
But even more than that, I do think if you go back a couple seasons to when they did have L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie, and then at that time too, you also had Justin Reed out there. Like you could look
Yeah.
at that and be like, okay, here's the trump card on defenses. Our coverage is going to be so good that Spags can call these blitzes and Chris Jones will have time to get there. And so like, I do think it gave them at least this avenue to having a dominant, we are going to shut you down defense, right? That was a possibility. I just don't think they had that last year. And looking at this roster going into this next season, I don't think they have that either. Could they get a little better in the secondary this year with a healthy Jalen Watson, adding Christian Fulton to the mix? Maybe Jaden Hicks comes out and is this absolute stud that's even better than what Justin Reed is. Sure, there is a pathway, but I'm just looking at it. I mean, there's like a slim chance, but I'm looking at it and I don't think that this defense is going to go out there into a game against a top tier must-have it game against a good offense, a great offense, and shut them down. And so the offense is still going to have a ton on their plate. And it's the NFL. You got to, there's balance. Everything works. It's all complementary football. Offense and defense has to work together. I just think that the pendulum has swung too far to the Chiefs are a defensive team. When you look at it, it's like, yeah, it's a good defense and they can be opportunistic in ways. They do some really cool stuff. The way Spags plans makes it really hard. But like, I don't ever think of them as going into a matchup thinking, oh man, this Chiefs defense is just going to shut down everything we do. And we're going to have to scrape by. Right. That's not the feeling that you have playing them. And so I think that was evident in the Super Bowl. The Eagles made mistakes. Their offense wasn't perfect by any stretch, especially in the first half of the game when it was still kind of tight before it just became a blowout. But you never felt like the Chiefs defense was just shutting the door. They were never slamming anything shut. Yeah, the hard spot to be in, but it's just, so that was just kind of my takeaways. I don't know if this is as defensive of a team as some people make it out to be.
I think that's wildly fair. I just want to follow up real quick on my my takeaway rabbit that I was chasing.
Yes.
There since Spagnuolo took over in 2019, 23 takeaways in 2019 the defense had, 22 the year following. The highest he had ever had was in what was this, 2019, 2020, 2021 they had 29 takeaways. That is a lot of takeaways. They were up in the upper third of the NFL there. And then you kind of see them settle into kind of a pretty steady area of where they get takeaways. 20 and what did that be? 2022, which that defense was pretty damn good, and they only had 20 takeaways. That's kind of impressive. 17 in 2023, and last year they had 20 takeaways. So they are, ever since the kind of let's see, that's 2022 where the Mahomes offense was legitimately insane. After that, they just kind of fell off a little bit in terms of their takeaways, and 29 takeaways in a season is that's a lot. But I thought that's an interesting trend with Spagnuolo's defenses.
2021, they guess how many fumbles they forced that year?
Oh gosh, I don't have 2021 in front of me.
18. They forced
that's
18
insane
fumbles. That's an absolutely insane number. As I was looking at it, they were 12th in interceptions that year, which is good, right? That's good for them. They were first in fumbles forced with 18. And the leader, Mike Hughes.
Mike Hughes, man, I'm telling you, a sleeper signing this year.
Well, I believe they signed Mike Edwards. Mike Hughes, I believe, is still playing for the Atlanta Falcons.
Well, I got my mics mixed up. It's May 19th.
It happens.
Yeah, Mike Edwards.
Mike Edwards.
Yeah.
It's understandable. I got to get on top of this before the chat does, before the comment section comes for you. Mike Hughes, legend for his performance in the Bills playoff game, forced 4 fumbles.
I just heard Mike and I was like, oh yeah, I like Mike Edwards. I'm going to push that agenda right now. And I just didn't listen all the way to what Maddie was talking about. I just heard Mike and I was like, yep, that's a perfect time. The chat knows if they watch that football show, I confused Marion Barber with Rondé Barber. And when we were talking about the 2011 Chiefs Bears game,
where does Tiki fit into all this?
Well, right. That's why I was so confused, because he's like Marion Barber. And I was like, I thought he was the cornerback. And Matt was like, oh, what are you talking about? And then somebody in the chat was like, you definitely meant Rondé Barber. Because I love By My Brother's Side, the book that they wrote, the children's book that they wrote. I read that book a good amount when I was a kid, and I was a big fan of the Barber Brothers. What can I say? But I was so taken aback. I was like, "This is a third Barber Brother? I have no clue about Marion Barber."
The third Barber brother. It's like another Manning coming out. It's like if the wide receiver Manning was actually good.
Yes. Oh gosh.
So that's 35 minutes of lessons that we had from Super Bowl 59. I don't envision this always being such a long, lessons we learned, but that was a tough game. There was a lot to be learned from it. When we get to like a week 9 game where the Chiefs squeak out a victory against, I don't even know who they played at that time.
Is that the Panthers? Is that week 9?
Sure. Yeah, let's call it the Panthers. I don't think we'll have as much to learn from that game, but that was a big, long lessons learned. On Wednesday, let's do week 3. Whoever the Chiefs played week 3, Kent and I will watch that game, and we will come back. I think it's the Falcons game, maybe?
Dude, that
sounds right.
Bengals week 4.
They were 2.
The Bengals were 2? They went... Their schedule last year sucked. Like, it was so bad. Like, that was brutal.
Wait, am I wrong?
I think that is Falcons. No, I'll pull it up right here because I went to go look at who week 9 was for the Kansas City Chiefs because I'm like, I think it was. I think you're right. I think it is the Falcons because they went and they played on like Monday night or something like that.
Okay. So Wednesday, lessons learned from the Chiefs versus the Falcons game. Big Nick Bolton 4th down stop that game.
Week 9 in 2024. Sorry, before we move on.
Was it bye?
No. Their bye week is like week 2 last year because they played the Bengals. They played the Buccaneers on Monday Night Football. That was the overtime game against the
okay, exactly. Lessons learned from that game are going to be a lot less than what it was from the Super
That
Bowl.
was the Kareem Hunt. That was a big Kareem Hunt game, if you remember correctly. I think
was that overtime game?
Yeah, he scored the walk-off touchdown.
And the Bucs had no wide receivers. They were throwing the ball to Cade Otton 15 times.
0. Yes,
everybody was toast.
Yes.
Yikes!
No, that was
what fun that'll be.
Oh yeah, you said week. What'd you say? Week 3?
Week 3. Whoever they played week 3.
Week 4 is Chargers. I think you're right. It's the Falcons.
Okay.
If the chat hasn't told us already,
Falcons,
I'm pretty sure it's the
Chiefs.
Falcons.
Yeah. What do you guys want to chat? Yell at us. Tell us we're right or wrong. I need the confirmation here. All right. It's time to do this positional breakdown. We are going deep on the edge position, but as always, we are starting this out by ranking the Chiefs edge position on the infamous, the best grading scale we have ever used, the local to Kansas City gas station grading scale. For a reminder for those that maybe, oh my gosh, it's across the bottom on the scroll bar.
On the video, podcast. Go ahead and read it out for the podcast, but on the video, they got it on the bottom. Yeah.
You guys watching, you guys got it. You guys listening, Quick Trip. Tier 1, the best you can be. Great. A lot of gas pumps. They're always working. The air is free, clean, good bathrooms, all the snack selection you want. Top tier. Number 2, Flying J. I know, surprising, but listen, a lot of gas pumps. They mostly work. It's mostly clean. They do have any snack or trucker hat that you might possibly want to buy. Sometimes the gas pumps don't work. I understand. It's a little bit out of your way, but that still lands it at tier 2. Then tier 3, we have 7-Eleven. There's a little bit of nostalgia there. It's a throwback. We get the Slurpee. We like it. They just come with low gas pumps. They don't usually work. It's a little dirty on the inside, but boy, you sit there and you get that slushy and you're feeling real nice. So it is a tier 3. And then finally, tier 4 is Shell gas stations because no, you don't go there unless you're out. Unless you're riding on empty with the gas tank open, you ain't stopping at a Shell. Okay, there it is. Nice and quick, gas station grading scale. Tucker, what do you give the edge position on the gas station grading scale?
Man, I have gone back and forth looking at this room because I think in something I'm waffling between 2 spots.
Shout out gas station sale and Alicia.
Thank you, Alicia, for the love of the gas station scale. Let me just read out the room. Let's just read out the room so it's all out there in the air, right?
That's fair.
George Karlaftis, Charles Omenihu, Ashton Gelati, 3rd-round pick this year. You got Mike Dana. You got Felix Udike-Uzomah, Malik Herring. Janarius Robinson is on the roster right now.
That's true.
Those are your ends right now. Those are your edge rushers. Matt, I need a little bit more than that if I'm going to give it a Quick Trip or even a Flying J, man. I think I got to go with 7-Eleven. Again, we're going back to my theme. My theme of the podcast is juice. I'm not seeing a lot of juice there, man. I'm not seeing a lot of juice that makes me super, jazzed about this edge room. I think they got some guys that can put on the hard hat and the lunch pail. Mike Dana, George Karlaftis, a couple guys that put in the work, are guys that are going to play your snaps, that are going to eat up and get that second effort stuff. Where's the juice coming from, Maddie? That's why I got to give it a 7-11.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from there. I am very much on the middle of this between wanting to give it a Flying J, a tier 2, and a 7-11. As I hear what you're saying, there's not a lot of juice. And like as a pass rushing unit, I would say it's definitely a 7-11, if not a shell. But they're pretty good at stopping the run, I think, across the board. Like, right, Mike Dana, very good run defender. Karloff, very good run defender. Charles Omenihu, when healthy, good run defender. So, like, I think even Felix showed some improvement as a run defender. Malik Herring, quality run defender, right? And so, I can't go Flying J out of respect for the art of the pass rush, and I don't think the Chiefs' edge room has a ton of it. So I think I do got to settle into a 7-11, but this is like a good 7-11. This is like, we have some that have come to like near me more recently. So they're new, they're fresh, they're still like, they just don't have like the old feel and look to them, which makes them, even when they're a little dirty, not seem as dirty. The gas pumps are still working because they're new and updated. This is a new 7-11 because they do think that they do the gritty stuff. They will stop the run. They're going to run twists in games. They are going to give you 110% every single snap. They have those guys. They have the grav leaders. So I do think there's a little bit there that you want to hold on to and you want to love, like the slushy from 7-Eleven. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's not, it can get better. There's better things out there on the horizon if you drove another mile down the street.
I think that's fair. And there's some of the 7-Elevens around here. Actually, they're now closing them up that just don't have gas pumps in them. They're just the 7-Eleven. I think that's kind of funny. But I will say, when I was making my judgment, it was more based on pass rush. When I think of edge, I think of the pass rush, right? When I think of run stopping, I think of the interior guys, the defensive tackle room. Maybe that's a little bit of a
the Chiefs laugh at your thought process given what their team looks like.
Dude, yeah, they're like, what are you talking about? You don't know anything about football or at all. But no, I do think that it's one of those things where I just need a little bit more. If they would have signed maybe another edge rusher in free agency, yeah, they do bring back Charles Omenihu, right? That was another thought process in here, is like they bring back Charles Omenihu and they get a full year of Charles Omenihu. Does that make them better? Does that make them better on their edge room? I think so, but I still think that it falls under the 7-Eleven category.
Yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable with the 7-Eleven for sure. I did have to like specify. I think it's a new 7-Eleven because I still have like a little bit in the back of my mind, like, hey, the stopping the run matters, and to Spags that matters, to Colin that matters. They are not a team that's just like, hey, pin it back. So I'll give them that. I think we're gonna move on here. Who do you think is the best player in the Chiefs edge room?
This might sound crazy. Is it?
You loading up some rice? Are you loading up some steak and cheese? Just going with the dry bowl here?
Triple steak, triple rice, sour cream and cheese, baby. The George Karlaftis Chipotle bowl. I think that's the easy answer, Maddie. I think George Karlaftis is the easy answer. But the best player at the position, could it be Charles Omenihu? Could it be a full year healthy Charles Omenihu? He had before he got hurt, he looked good, came back in this season, he was a little bit rusty, but he was getting into it, right? He just had a few games before he got into it. Now he's got the full offseason to prepare. The talent with Charles Omenihu, I think, is one of the things that you really like. And maybe I'm projecting a little bit, right? When it comes down to what Charles Omenihu is, he's the most, I think he's probably the most sexy name in this defensive end room when you look at it, the sexier type of player when it comes down to all this. But I think Charles Omenihu has a good stake in being maybe the best player in this defensive end room.
So I think if we go back to your theory of limiting it to pass rush specifically, yes, I think the upside of Charles Omenihu purely as a pass rusher, and I'm thinking it's not even like from a complimentary piece, but from a one-on-one, I need a sack on this 3rd and 9, and we're not setting up Chris Jones one-on-one. It's you versus somebody else. I think Charles Omenihu probably has better moves and more moves to beat a blocker. So like from that respect, I can see how saying Omenihu with a healthy offseason, and remember, he was suspended in 2023 to start the year.
True,
It doesn't impact his health, but he was coming to a new team, a new system, and missed some time before he got out there and really got to start to roll. So this is the first time where theoretically he's going to have a full offseason with this new team and hit the ground running from week one with some familiarity with the system. So no, I don't think it's crazy to say, especially from a pass rushing centric standpoint, that he might be their best player. I said it all last year. He's their second best pure pass rusher. I don't think it's particularly close right now between him and Karlaftis, but including the run defense, including the effort, including the ability to play contain and to play off of Chris Jones, I will still give it to the driest Chipotle bowl of all time and the triple steak, triple rice cheese. I didn't remember there being sour cream, so I guess that helps a little bit with like
it kind of helps. I mean, I didn't not a lot.
That's crazy. And the jaw power that somebody has to have to eat that bowl to finish that bowl. My jaw would be so sore just from.
The steak is not the most tender steak in the world either. Let's not act like Chipotle is going medium rare with it here.
That's what I'm saying. So yeah, I mean, I think Karlaftis does get the nod, but I can see the pathway to it being Charles Omenihu. And maybe this is a kind of the same answer, maybe not. Who do you think takes a step forward this year among this room?
You know, I'm going to also call out an easy answer here, and this could be your answer. I think Felix is the easy answer to take here, right? Felix, with more opportunities, can take a step.
Boy,
here.
We hope.
You certainly do hope that that's the answer. I'm going to say it's Mike Danna, though, because last year wasn't the best year for Mike Danna. And like, really, this is kind of a contract year for him. I know he technically has there's an out after this year. So if you're the Chiefs and you want on your defensive end, you're looking at this edge room. That's the guy you kind of need to take a step. Like he kind of needs to go back to the production level he had prior to signing that large contract. I think that's the guy that you want to see go back to those that playmaking ability that he did have. There was a little bit there where he was unblockable prior to signing that contract, and he was playing incredibly
Chargers games.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I mean, you got to get him to that level, and I think by that thought process and that level of thinking, right? If you took a step back last year, you need him to take that step back, and I think that's what you need to show up, and that's who you signed, right? So I think to get that guy back will be huge for this room, especially because he is slated right now to be the starter on this defensive line. So to have him take a step would be huge for this team.
So I was just reading through the chat. We got a lot of, Karlaftis is the majority favorite there for the best player. I think you kind of got to lean that way. Yeah. So, you're here in the chat. Let us know who you think is the guy that will, not who you want or needs to, but who will take a step forward this year. And hey, listen, we talked about him, and this is it. Charles Omenihu. That's my guy to take a step forward. We mentioned it. He hasn't gotten that full off season yet. I think he's primed. He should have his best season for the Chiefs this year. This should be the year that he has his best season for the Chiefs. I actually thought he got a lot better as a run defender last year, even coming back from an injury than he was his first year with the Chiefs. So that was a step in the right direction. And then if you get back to a guy that is more comfortable rushing the passer, not coming off an injury, and in the system, I think he's primed to have his best year. His best season in the NFL was the year prior to the Chiefs in San Francisco. He had 43 pressures that year, ended up with 7 sacks. He did have one more in Kansas City, but like in the 2023. But like, I just think that he's in position to have his best year. And I think if he can continue that level of play, the 2023 pass rush with the 2024 run defense for an entire season, that's going to be his best season of his career. And that's an improvement, right? And so like, I do think if we're saying he has a chance to push Karlaftis for the best edge player on this team, it's a possibility. I think he has to take a step forward for that to happen. I definitely think he can and or will. So yeah, I think Omenihu, I don't need to go too much further into it because I just think that he has the most tools to pull it off essentially. We got a Gelati from, oh yeah, sorry.
I was going to hit this too.
Yeah. All right, let's see here. We are moving on to sleeper UDF. So, okay, sleeper and UDFA to watch. I was going to say, I guess is.
So they obviously drafted Ashton Gelati, right? And that's the one guy that they didn't sign the UDFA in this position. And we have talked about all of 4 of these guys already.
Everybody else.
Yeah. So everybody else. I mean, the 2 guys we haven't talked about are Malik Herring, Janarius Robinson. Not Gelati yet. We haven't talked about Gelati, obviously, but usually when you think about a sleeper UDFA, you think of a young guy, and they only really have one young guy in this room.
Yeah, and so, yeah, I mean, Jelani would have been my pick for here, and it's not so much as a sleeper as like, haha, he's gonna be way better than you think, because I think everybody's kind of like, he's a rookie. We'll see what he does, but we kind of like him. I just think he might have a sneaky, like Mike Dana-esque stat line where you get to the end of the year and you're like, wait, Gelati has 5, or like George Karlaftis is a rookie. This guy has 5 or 6 sacks. And like, ultimately, I don't know how impactful they'll be. They might be cleanup sacks. They might be unblocked. They might be beating a tight end, but I think he's fully capable of that. And I think he plays with the energy you need and a certain level of athleticism and just like physical strength. He plays like a grown man. And I think that matters when we're talking about hitting the NFL and performing early, especially in the trenches. So like, I do think that he's a little bit of a sleeper, I think, to maybe put up some stats, even if like the overall impact does still say, hey, he's going to be a year or two away, like any other round 3 edge player in the NFL ever drafted has been. I could just see a pathway to him putting up a few more numbers to fall into this category.
I love this comment from Weston Brewer here. He says Jake Briningstool all the way. Yeah, I love the impassioned and the impassioned fans that Jake Briningstool has. There was a few in here too that weren't about the edge position, but yeah, the sleepers and UDFAs are pertain to the edge position, right? I know that the Chiefs were not very active in the UDFA market. I talked about that with Matt Miller on 21 Questions. That like not typically, like they typically are active in the UDFA market. This year, not so much. They didn't sign a ton of UDFAs.
Tells you that they think their roster's pretty full, though, right? Because like if you're a UDFA dealing with agents, like you see what the Chiefs have, and you're like, oh, is there a spot for my guy to win there? And you just don't know, right? And if you don't know, you might take another team. I do think it's worth noted they did pay Briningstool a fair amount of money. Esa Pohl and Dalton Cooper, I believe is his name, were brought in to play on the offensive line. So like they did bring in, hey, my guy, shout out Elijah Badger. They did bring in some guys, right? They did bring in some guys that I think have a chance, but not a ton compared to years past. And I do think that wonder if this says, hey, this roster's pretty full across the board. Okay, I got our final thing here. Do you think the Chiefs should add anybody to this defensive end room before the season starts? Or, and then actually, no, do you think they should? We'll start there.
I think this kind of goes into like should they / who they, right? I think that kind of is like the same kind of conversation because I pulled up the Spot Track page on the available free agent edge rushers right now, and let me tell you, it is not enticing. You know me, I was talking about the juice, right? I wanted to see some juice. There's not a lot of juice left out there on the market. You're looking at Von Miller, who is 36 years old. Matt Judon, it's an interesting one. You maybe throw out there. Zadarius Smith, Jadeveon Clowney was just cut. Maybe this is finally the year Jadeveon Clowney comes to the Kansas City Chiefs. Probably not. Donald Passanio, he's out there. He's only 30. That's crazy. I thought he was way older than that. But I mean, looking at the names out there, I mean, there's just not a lot that I am thrilled when it comes to adding the team. Do I think they need to add somebody? I don't think they need to. Just with looking at what I like for them, I don't know who it would be, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Do I think they need to add some more juice? Yes. Do I think the guy that have to add more juice is out there? No. So that's that's a tough question to answer, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So 2 things. I got a couple things here. Where do I want to go next? This is why it's better when I just get to like fire off the hip and not let Kent steal the show. Okay. I don't know if there's a spot. Should they add somebody? I don't know. I don't know if there's a spot, right? Like we talked about it. You got Karlaftis, you got Omenihu, you got Dana, you got Gelati, you got Felix. There's 5 guys right there that I'm pretty sure are going to be locked into making this roster, right? And then okay, yeah, Malik Herring or Janarius Robinson, maybe you could do better than them and improve on them. I'm not going to argue that, but am I going out there to sign Jadeveon Clowney? Or I see Preston Smith coming over here from Weston in the chat. Like, am I going to go sign those guys to be my 6th defensive end at this point in time? Or like really try to push anyone down? Like it's not a room that has a ton of juice, as you put it. There's not a ton of like playmakers in this group, but they do have a lot of bodies that have shown they can play at the NFL level, that have shown like they know the system. They are able to do this. So if money's tight, is that really the best way to use the little bit that you may be able to create or make? So no, I don't think they should. If they did, I think it would probably be more of churning over that back end. It would be somebody gets cut post June 1st that they think is going to be better than Janarius Robinson, or that they think is going to be better than Malik Herring. I would get worried if they add somebody in that middle stretch that's clearly better than those guys, but not good enough to be a starter for where Felix is at. If they add somebody to that middle section, I would, or even somebody to be a starter. I'd actually just take that straight back. If they add anybody, I might just be a little bit worried at where Felix is at. Unless it's clearly bottom of the roster turnover, it feels like adding someone's almost giving up on what you think Felix might be in the future.
I want to go back to the point that you made about just kind of like where their roster's at right now, right? Because I think that's a really good point. We said we had 5 locks, right? Usually on the defensive line in total, you keep 10 guys. And if you talk about the defensive tackle room, which I know this is like looking ahead to another position group that you guys are going to go over, Chris Jones and Mike Pennell, those guys are going to be locks. Jerry Tillery is probably going to be a lock. Omar Norman Lott's probably going to be a lock. And then you have Fabian Lovett, Marlon Tuiapulotu, Ika Saki, and I don't even know that guy. It looks like he was a unrestricted or a UDFA. So like they've got 3 other guys that they can choose from to make it 10 just on the interior defensive line. And we know that they got interior defensive linemen like Jerry Tillery that are inside out rushers, like Chris Jones that are inside out rushers. So I think that when you look at the offensive line, the defensive line, they are kind of set when it comes to their roster right now. But I think that's a really good point that somebody that probably speaks more to what they have in the room, obviously with Felix, than what it would with maybe just adding that talent in general.
Yeah. I mean, that's just like I just look at it and like, I know when Clowney got cut, it was like right at the same time as Gabe Davis was getting cut. And like Clowney's definitely a better player, but like, I think you could have a more clear path to a Gabe Davis making this roster and being an improvement. Whereas Clowney definitely is better than some of the guys in this roster. It just seems like it would be a little bit of a, not silly and not unuseful, but just like a little out of the pocket use of money, I think, given what they do have, because they have what they have is solid. It's just not great. Right. And like at this point in time, you're not getting great in the free agency heap. So I don't know. It's weird. I didn't want to say, this is my other thing that popped into my head as I was glancing over this. We didn't mention Jerry Tillery at all. And I understand the initial thought process here is probably a little bit of like, hey, that's a defensive tackle. He's listed defensive tackle. He's played defensive tackle, but guess what? He also plays a lot of defensive end. Yeah, it's been in a little bit more of like an odd front defense when he has, but like he has played out over an offensive tackle quite a bit in his career in the NFL. Like that is something that is definitely in his wheelhouse. So I just think it is worth at least noting. I think we'll get more into Tillery and where he settles in on some of this stuff when we do the defensive tackles, but I'm just going to pull it up here real quick. I don't know if I have completely lost Tucker or if just his video is frozen. So
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. I can hear you. Yes.
I'm just frozen. Yeah.
You're just frozen. Yeah.
Okay.
So Tillery has lined, even last year, he lined up over the tackle more times than he lined up in the B gap or the A gap. And even if you go down to 2023, this is with Minnesota, it has been essentially the same. He has been a defensive end more than he's been a defensive tackle for Minnesota. You have to go back to his time with the Chargers to see him play predominantly as an interior player. Or sorry, not the Chargers, the Raiders, as an interior player. But even then, he still went over 100 snaps playing out wide. So Jerry Tillery maybe should have factored into this conversation a little bit more. Maybe the Chiefs plan to use him out there. I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily love how he was used in Minnesota, truthfully. When you go back and you look at kind of some of the plays that he was there, I didn't love that. And I think that kind of maybe turned me off a little bit of him, maybe at the outside edge position a little bit. But I do think that, like, also you look at this defensive tackle class. So this is a little bit, I guess, a little bit of a preview for you guys to do this one. Whole lot of 3 techs in there. They got a whole lot of 3 techs. And as I mentioned, the inside-outside versatility that they have on their interior guys as well is something that I think does add to the edge room. And I think that is something to talk about, right? Because they do like to mix and match of where these guys do line up. And I think that does play into it a little bit, especially with, Chris Jones being the best interior defensive lineman, being able to line up wherever he wants on the defensive line. That plays into it. But the guys that they have listed at defensive end, I think we did a fairly comprehensive breakdown of those fellas.
Listen, I think it's a fantastic show. I think we covered the edge room, top to bottom, deep to shallow, left to right. We covered we even talked about a defensive tackle in our edge position. Listen to it.
There you go.
And we gave you guys 35 minutes of lessons that we learned from rewatching the embarrassing Super Bowl 59 loss to the Eagles. So we appreciate you guys as always for kicking it with us here on a Monday evening, or listening or watching this later, whatever you do. Thank you, Tucker D. Franklin. The D stands for the most clutch sixth man of the year, stepping in, and KCSN's employee of the year too, obviously. For stepping in place of Kent. We will be back on Wednesday for another KC Lab. We will be deep diving into the wide receiver position and talking about lessons we learned from the Chiefs' victory over the Atlanta Falcons in week 3. Watch the game before Wednesday. Rewatch it. Come in, hang out with us. Give us your lessons you learned from rewatching that game. But as always, we appreciate it. Shout out Emprise Bank, and we will catch you guys later in the week.
Got it over an hour.
Go Wolves.